Hello, I'm Ernie Kaiser, a trustee of the Weston Historical Society. With me is Karen Giannitti, a native Westonite who is deeply knowledgeable about the history of the town, and was a longtime volunteer as a collections manager for the Society, as well as the editor of The Chronicle, its historical almanac. Today is January 14th, 2016, and Karen and I are here to interview Judy Albin. Judy lives in the historic Moore House home, which dates back to 1859. She has been a commercial artist, a teacher's aide in the Weston Elementary School, and a well-known local volunteer. Judy is also well versed on the history of Weston's Moore House family, whose ancestors fought in the Civil War. Today, Judy continues to express her creativity in her art, samples of which decorate the walls of her home. Thank you for inviting us into your home, Judy. Let me start off by asking, when and where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I lived there until I was about 6 years old, when my stepfather's business, he worked for White Tower, they moved 20 families east, and they wanted to open up a main branch in Stamford. We ended up in Rowayton, and that's where I basically grew up until shortly before I was married.
So you had one younger sister? Any brothers?
One younger brother, he was 10 years younger than I. He was born when we got to Rowayton. And I was captivated by him. You know, I was 10 years old, and here's this brand new baby, like a living baby doll.
Yeah.
I was excited.
Great. What kinds of things did you do as a kid? Were you, did you just play outside? Did you have free range, like they call it now, free range children?
Well, actually, in Rowayton, we were fortunate because back in the 40s, 1941 was when we moved here, and my brother was born in 44. And Rowayton was a very small community, and we were able to get on our bikes, walk all over town. Everybody in that community knew who we kids were, knew our parents. So if we went off the track, so to speak, it was told to our parents.
And get away with
Sure.
the thing.
No, we could not. One of the fun things we did do was to take a penny bike ride. And that was to get on our bikes, and when we came to the end of the road where we had to turn left or right, we'd flip the coin. Heads, we would go one way, tails the other. And we did this all around until we would come to a road that we weren't too sure we wanted to take because we didn't know it. So we would cancel that coin flip. But that was one of the fun things we did. And we skated at the old school pond. We went swimming down at Bailey Beach. We were just all over that town. Played ball, softball, and it was great.
When did you realize that you had a talent for art? Did you always draw, Judy?
No, the only time I remember it first coming into play was when I went to the Rowayton Elementary School. And we would have an art teacher who would come in periodically. And she would have a lesson, and we all would have to do the same drawing. And my drawings usually came out very well, and she would show the class. And it got to a point where my friends would say, Judy, would you draw this roof for me? Or would you draw this tree? I can't make it right. And then paper dolls were pretty well known then. And my sister and I had our supply. And I used to take my paper doll and lay her down on a piece of paper and draw the outline of a new wardrobe and color them in and cut them out, and it was wonderful fun.
So now we get into your adulthood and meeting Ernie.
I
tell us about
met
that?
Ernie when I was 13. I was in the Girl Scouts, and we had square dancing was very popular then. And we planned a square dance a number of them, but the first one in a neighbor's barn. And we girls were to invite a boy to go to the square dance. So I gathered up my courage because I had seen Ernie a couple of times. Liked him. He had incredible eyes, but most of all, a wonderful smile. And so I got courageous and I called and asked him to the square dance. And he said, I'll let you know. And one day he came up the road on his bicycle, and there was a little boy across the street from our house that his chain had slipped off his bike. And Ernie went over to help him fix it. And he came over and I had gone to the door, and he said, do you have a screwdriver? And I thought, oh, please God, let me have a screwdriver and know where it is. So I found one. Thank God, ran out, gave it to him. When he returned it, he said, oh, about that square dance. He said, yeah, I can go. I said, oh, great. I took the the screwdriver, managed to get into the house, flopped down on the couch and said, he said yes.
I love it.
And as I say, I was at the ripe old age of 13. And when I got to the riper age of 23, we met at the altar in Rowayton, and we were married.
After he got out of the service, you both came back to Rowayton, and then you actually moved to Weston?
What we did, we found an apartment, and because we weren't sure what was going to happen. And in the meantime, the family up here in this house was left. The only person left was Mary. And Mary, of the 3 children that Ebenezer and Nancy had, she was the only one who got married. And she married a Nathaniel Hill. And they had 1 child, a daughter, who in turn married a George Albin. They in turn had 1 child, and it was Ernie's father.
For heaven's sake.
So that's how this house ended up in just Ernie's father, because it was the only survivor, the only child.
Only child.
And Grandma Hill, as everybody had called her, she was up here and she fell. And she had no phone, no plumbing, no wiring, no nothing. And she fell in the side yard. And fortunately, a milkman had come, and he heard her, she heard him, and she hollered. And he went next door to Minerva Morehouse's mother, where she had a telephone. And they called and asked for help. Long story short, Ernie's parents decided this was not the place for Grandma to live by herself, so they took her to Rowayton. And she was there and passed away. Now, the house sat across from where it is now, and it sat on 170 some odd acres.
This was before you moved in?
Oh yeah, well before. And the house was moved the house sat across the street on this large tract of land. Here, where the house is now, there were 55 acres. Ernie's father was the only heir to this acreage. And it was draining him because it cost him taxes, but no money coming in. So he decided to put both tracts of land on the market, which he did. The larger tract sold. Buyers were not interested in the farmhouse. They were going to tear it down. Now, Ernie and I were married. We had our son and just had, or were expecting, our second child, when Ernie's father came to us and said, would you be interested in the farmhouse in Weston? Well, Ernie had never been inside except into the room in which we're sitting right now. The family used it as their sitting room. They never went into the kitchen, Ernie and his family. They came up every Sunday to help the family with whatever they needed. And so when Dad offered the house to us, Ernie and I came up, walked through the house, and I said to Ernie, we'll never need any more house than this. This is perfect. So we told Dad, yeah, we would be definitely interested. So his comment to us was, we have to get it off the property it's on. And I'll pay for the move. You pick where you want the house to sit. And then getting the plumbing, wiring, heating, and foundation will be up to you. So that's what we did. They moved this house like it was a new child. That's all I can say. It was lifted up, came across the road, down the driveway. They had to stop at one point because there was a cedar tree that knocked out the first pillar on the porch, which was that far pillar, because it came down that way. Then they turned it around. This lift had a turntable that they were able to turn this house around, and then they set it down on the foundation and removed the big beams. It was fascinating. We had a whole bunch of people out on the road that came to watch this maneuver.
They're amazing.
And it was incredible.
So now you find yourself in Weston and raising your children, but at some point you went back to work. Tell us how that story happened.
Well, when my oldest was in first grade, his teacher sent home a note with him telling me that there was an opening down at the school, and would I be interested in finding out about it, and then if I was interested, would I apply? Turned out it was cafeteria aide. They had had volunteer mothers come into the cafeteria. Well, they found that not all the mothers were reliable, or something would come up, and for some reason a mother couldn't be there. Trying to find substitutes was hair-pulling. So they decided to throw it out and see if they could find somebody. And when I found out what it was, that I would be monitoring about 165 kids in a cafeteria, I thought, oh no. But I thought, I'm going to give it a whirl, because I was full of house care, laundry, kids, repeated day after day after day. And I knew there was more to life than this. So I wanted to taste it. So I said, yeah, I applied for the job, and I was hired. And it turned out to be a lot of fun. There was a PA system, and I could use that to remind some of the kids what they were supposed to do. But I also found it was a tool that got them under control, because I would say to them, the first group at a table that is sitting quietly and all cleaned up can come up and use the speaker to do riddles and knock-knocks. Well, they thought that was the coolest thing.
So your interest in history, I know you said coming to this house and learning about Ebenezer instilled this interest in history and then into the Historical Society?
Yes, but the interesting part was we really didn't know how very interesting it was going to be until after Ernie's father had died. It was in 2001 or 2002 when Ernie's mother said to him, there's a box in the attic. Bring it down, because I think you and Judy should go through this. It's material that we took out of the attic in Weston. So here on this very table, this big cardboard carton sat. And Ernie, who was a traveling salesperson, and he was 365 days a year except for vacation, he would be busy upstairs, but I would pull some of the things out. And one of the things I pulled out was Ebenezer's letter from California. And the first one I read was dated August 10th, I think. Maybe it's not here. Where do I? Oh, here. The first letter I read was dated August 10th, 1851. And I pulled out this letter that I now have here, but I can show. Here it is. And I'm sitting here reading this beautiful manuscript. His cursive is gorgeous. His spelling was atrocious. But it
And it was
dawned
all
on me,
names.
my got goosebumps when I realized I was holding the very paper upon which he had written, and it was from Murderer's Bar, August 10th, 1851. And I went, oh my word. And I put the paper down on the table and took my hands away from it, and I thought, what do? I don't want to ruin it. Well, it's not ruined because it's still here in acid-free folders. And then we found another that told about his trip when he went to California. And he went through Panama. He didn't cross country. And I actually got a map and wrote down what he wrote and identified it here on the map and put it in writing so I could easily track. No Panama Canal, so there was quite a bit of work getting over there. And then he arrives in, I finally arrived in the Golden State, in the wonderful city of San Francisco, or the Golden City of San Francisco. Ebenezer was there, and he found good gold in Murderer's Bar in that particular area. And he sent it home, and he was out there from 1851 until 1859. He was 21 when he went out. His mother and brother were in a small house, and he sent money out for them to have a house. Their father had died when Ebenezer was 17, and his older brother, David, was with the mom, with their mother. And so the first house was built, which is now at Morehouse Farm Park. And then he had this house built. Both houses were built almost the same identical layout, built by the same people, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. And then Ebenezer came back in 1859, and he married Nancy Bennett Roland, who was the eldest daughter of a Judge Charles Roland here in Weston. And I assume that they knew each other earlier, and when he came home, he reacquainted, and they were married. And then the three children.
You mentioned that Ebenezer had sent back gold nuggets, and you were able to get access to them for some use in the schools.
Right. Well, this is what when we got the material from Ernie's mother, we didn't get the gold at that time. That came much later. And when we did get it, at this point we were ready to start a field trip with second grade. One of the second grade teachers started a program, Weston Then and Now. And it was wonderful. And based on that, we used that theme, bringing the kids to the Coley House, because we talked about how they lived now and how people lived then a long time ago. So we did that sort of thing. And then I told them that the house they saw in the picture was built by a man, Ebenezer Morehouse, who was my husband's great-great-grandfather. And I live in that house today. But he had it built with gold rush money. And he came back with gold. And so then in my hand, I would hold out this gold nugget, and they would look at it and kind of, ooh, and I'd say, now, I'm not sure how heavy this is, but it's heavier than it looks. And so I would let each of them get a chance to hold the nugget. Well, that spread around that first group of second graders like wildfire. We get to hold real gold. And they did. And this particular nugget, Ebenezer evidently had it fit with a pin so his wife could wear it at the top of her blouse. I removed the pin because I knew children were going to be holding it, and I wasn't going to wear it at the neck of a blouse.
Wonderful. Now you have other important documents that you brought to show.
Yes, I brought, because when we went through all of this material, we came across a leather diary, and Ernie opened it up, and he was shocked because it was dated January 1, 1863, and it was written by Rufus King Roland, who was Nancy Roland Morehouse, Ebenezer's wife. We figured in her family. And at age 17, he went into the Civil War. And his first, he tells about, his name is Rufus King Roland, and he tells about that he's part of the Banks Division, and the first entry is dated January 1, 1863, and he goes on until August is the last entry. And in the course of his describing and he writes about every day, he tells that there's dysentery in the division he's in. He's down in Louisiana. And he talks about digging up turnips and sweet potatoes in fields because they have no way of, refrigeration. So they hunt for food as they travel. Anyhow, there's one entry that moved me immensely. Is it okay if I read this?
Please do.
He talks about the weather just about every day. He said, cloudy and hot. Got off the cars again this morning and cooked coffee. Don't know whether we are going anywhere or not. On guard all night, and on the evening. In the evening, I happened to think that it was my birthday, and there I was on guard duty in the rain. And that hit my heart, and I thought, oh my gosh, he turned 18, and he's by himself on guard duty in the rain in some forsaken place down south. That really, really bothered me.
And amid the horror of the Civil War.
Oh, yes, amidst that. His last entry is dated August 19th. And he writes in pencil this time. Most of them lately in this last part are pencil. And he writes one sentence, and then he writes and another letter, and the pencil slides down, and there's no more entry. And we knew he passed away that fall, and he's buried down in the Weston Cemetery, just above the garden, along with the whole family. Ebenezer, Nancy, Charles, Mary, the whole group, and so is Rufus. We had no neighbors except really the Morehouse family across the way. And Blue Spruce Circle had just been started, and it got to the top of the hill, and there was a family in the first house up there. And that's all there were. Well, that spring, a friend of mine from Norwalk came up to visit me. and we had coffee sitting in the kitchen. And she said, "Judy, how can you stand it living up here? There's nobody, no one around, nobody to sit and have coffee with." I said, "Carolyn, I love it. Every single window I go to, I look out and see God's greenery. I don't see any other woman's laundry flapping in the breeze. I don't hear any other mother calling her kids." And I said, "I've got nature and I love it." She thought I was balmy. Well, not long, Blue Spruce Circle grew. And what happened, as each new family moved in, we would have either with the mothers, if they were home, sort of a luncheon or a tea. And then just so they got to know who they had moved in with. Bit by bit, that got to include husbands and wives, and we would have weekend parties, and whether it was the holidays or just the doldrums, it's been so blah. How about coming down Saturday night? Ernie and I bought an above-the-ground pool and put it in. Nobody on the circle had a pool. And so I made up this invitation and put it in everybody's box and invited them to come down to the pool. I didn't know that what I ended up doing, it was like somebody had put a sign out front, "Summer Day Camp for Boys," because it was mostly boys. And this house just rocked with kids. And then we would have parties. This chandelier that was raised up. This table was taken apart, stored in the laundry room, and we would dance. We had some people who played guitar and sang, and we had live music. And if it wasn't at this house, it was at Brookover's, it was anywhere up on the neighborhood where there would be a party, and we had the guys play their guitars, and we just had the best time.
Concluding, tell us a little bit about, well, give us a memory about some of the favorite things that you can look back upon.
Well, one of the things I look back upon that I can talk about is not here. Oh, it's here. When I worked at Norden Systems, I was in publications and loved every minute. And I managed to do one project that won an award for me from Norden Systems. I got this plaque, and I got a certificate, a financial certificate, and it was all for this book, Productivity Team Skills. It was that Norden used to use outside source for productivity team improvement. And then this one gal decided that they would do it in-house. And she came to me and asked if I'd be interested in working with her on this project. I said, sure. You know, why not? So this is what I did. It was a 5-day deal, Monday through Friday. And every... I have to turn pages, but I developed this character, and it was on the cover, and then all through the book I used the character for illustration. Oh, here again, productivity, potential, from the acorn to the mighty oak. And these are all things that I created, so my creativity was growing, my creative thinking, because you know, with anything, the more you're asked to do, the more you do it, and the more you do it, the easier it becomes until it's worn out. And then
Well,
say,
we can certainly see why you
"Sorry."
have such, we can certainly see why you have such great pride in your art and your creativity.
Oh, I've just always enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed using it wherever. Like Dr. Tomasello, who was principal at the elementary school. After I left Norden, I went back. My final days were 10 years in kindergarten as a kindergarten aide. Oh gosh, I loved it, loved it. I would whistle my way in and think, gosh, they're paying me to do this? I mean, this is unbelievable. But Dr. Tomasello realized that new kindergartners, they can't read. And here they were going into Miss So-and-so's class or Mrs. So-and-so's or Mr. So-and-so's. And he said, Judy, maybe you could help me out. Suppose we go to each teacher, have them decide what book character they really like that's of that level. And I would take that book character, and Ernie made wood plaques for me. And I painted the characters on the plaques, and they were mounted just outside the kindergarten doors. So the kids got to know, oh, I go to the class with the big red dog. I go to the class with, and it worked. And he was so pleased with the result that it helped the kids.
Well, you've given us a real great glimpse into your creativity and your work with children and you as a teacher and
Your love of Weston and its family.
Absolutely.
All
Oh,
this stuff. It's
gosh,
just
yeah.
amazing.
So now leave us with a few words of wisdom. What would you tell someone growing up today or some thought? But
Just very simply follow your heart. What makes you feel good and is going to create good, and make you feel proud of having done it. That's, what else can you say? We all have to work, we all have to live with one another, we all have to contend with things, and so just do the best you can and do what you love doing, and when you make others feel good, that makes you feel good.
well, that's wonderful. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful.